So when I've met you and when I've spoken to you before, that something that really interests me and certainly interests our clients is that we talk a lot on our business development program, Business Basics First. We talk a lot about credibility creation. We talk about raising your profile. We talk about talking to your customers in a way which aligns to their thinking. So when I wanted to get into this, I started looking at it and trying to understand, and I thought, well, we as humans love stories. You know, Hansel and Gretel, Snow White, all these stories that we hear about when we're kids. We want to find out what happened, and we will read that story over and over again because we think of ourselves as those kids. Or, you know, Disney does this really well. Or even when we're older, there's a horror movie or Lost or something like that. You know, we watch those because we can align with those stories. And Gary Vaynerchuk talks about this a lot. You know, he says Walt Disney was a great storyteller.
Yes.
Steve Jobs probably sold his iPad and iPhone by talking about how it's important in your life, as opposed to here's a piece of kit which is 128 gigabytes and really fast. The art of storytelling is really important in business. It's important in life if you want to build a brand. The art of storytelling is really powerful for you to stand out from a crowd. When I've heard you speak on these topics, I've literally sat and listened to you for a long time, because what you've been saying makes a lot of sense to me.
Thank you.
So how did you sort of get into this? Did you realise it? The LinkedIn stuff you've done, the other things you've been doing is really the same path, isn't it?
Yeah, so I was doing video work in a tiny way, even before YouTube came about. I was working with a company in America, and I was messing around with video stuff. And it wasn't until I saw this video learning company who were creating videos, and I said, I want to learn how to do that. And the whole purpose of it was to create some sort of a story. But I hadn't gone into it consciously, storytelling at that stage. It only happened when I discovered whiteboard animation, which is what I do now, which I major on now. And when I started creating whiteboard animation videos for people, I started creating it based on what they wanted, which was, here's my product, buy me, which is not very memorable, right?
So memorable being able to stay in that person's mind when, you know, they're out in the market looking for something, or when they've got a problem, being memorable for those kind of things, right?
Yeah,
not just a shock and awe.
Because people will say, yeah, but adverts work. Yeah, the only reason they work because you're pounded with them every single day. So we're literally brainwashed with adverts. You know, if people do an advertising campaign, you'll see it on a bus stop, you'll see it on the TV, you'll see banners in the shops, you'll see it everywhere. You know, if anybody has watched any Darren Brown stuff, you know it works. You know, if you put a bear on a street corner and you then get them to do some sort of exercise, and you keep repeating the bear down the street where people walk, and you say, okay, design an advertising campaign, they'll go and draw a bear on that, but they don't know why a bear has appeared in the advertising campaign, because they saw it en route to the project or something. So adverts work to a point, but we know, because you've mentioned in terms of movie storytelling, that works, and it, you know, it's more memorable for a longer time. So if I asked you, what was the last movie you saw, and what is the one thing that you remember from it?
Okay, so I'm a bit ashamed to say this. The last movie I saw was the Thor movie with my kids.
Yeah, brilliant.
And what did I like about it? What do you remember?
What was the most memorable bit in the movie?
Or
did you fall asleep?
I literally had my kids and my kids and my nephews with me, so I was literally just running to the bathroom all the time. But I guess the images and the colour and the action, if you ask me what was memorable, it was those kind of things. But the video brings that to life, doesn't it?
The thing is about movie or storytelling in movies, have you come across something called the hero's journey?
No.
No. So I learned this from somebody who I recently met at a networking event. In fact, Keith Higgs was speaking, and Michael Don Smith was there, and we got chatting about storytelling, and he mentioned the hero's journey to me. And the hero's journey, which is told virtually in every single movie, unless it's a documentary one, and they will still try and make it the hero's journey, is the hero gets called to go and, let's say, Lord of the Rings, for example. He gets a calling to go after somewhere, but he's reluctant to begin with. And then he has to be convinced by some, magician or some other character that says, no, you need to go on this journey to recover the ring, for example.
Yeah.
And he's still reluctant, but eventually he goes. And then on his journey, he gets lots of barriers and obstacles and villains and stuff that he has to battle and, obstacles that he has to overcome. But it's not the only thing. It doesn't happen once. It happens many times.
Yeah.
Almost to the point where we think he's not going to make it. And what happens then, we go on the hero side. We start going, well, really, really want this guy to succeed. We want him to win. We want him to live. We want him to succeed in his mission. And then when he achieves the mission at the end of the journey, and this will be told in the movie that you went to see as well, then, the hero has won, they walk into the sunset, maybe something else comes nowadays and tells you there's going to be a follow-up, but that, oh, phew, yeah, he won, he got to the end of it, and all the action and excitement happened in the middle. And that journey is called, the hero's journey, but it's like, what is, what could be, what is, what could be, what is, what could be. And that is what I'm calling it now, the storytelling algorithm. You tell people what is currently. It's like Charles Dickens's Ghost of Christmas Past. You look back and say, what are all the things that happened in the past that has shaped you where you are today? And what are all the things that are going to happen in the future if you don't change? So when you tell a story of what is what could be, what is what could be, that if you don't change, you're not going to succeed in this world, right? Yeah. So if we've got a product or a service we want to give to somebody, we want to supply to somebody, we need to show them that you're going to be worse off without it at some stage.
Yeah.
So when you get people like Steve Jobs, basically convincing everybody that your life is going to be worse off without an iPhone.
Yeah.
And
that's literally what he did.
That's literally what he does.
Yeah.
And apart from showing people, or even the words that he uses, this is gorgeous, this is beautiful. Now consider this, when he launched the iPhone, he'd been working on it for 2 years, right? But if we work on anything for 2 years, we're bored with it. But the way he came across when he launched it was, look at this is so beautiful, this is gorgeous. I've been waiting for this day for 2 years.
Yeah.
So everybody immediately imagines in their mind, my God, I can see the journey he's been on for 2 years. You literally go into this person's mind.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I've answered your question or not, but there's just one little thing to add to that. Chris Anderson, he's the curator of TED Talks. If anybody wants to look up Chris Anderson on TED Talks. It was March 2016 that he launched a particular clip where he explains the secret of a TED Talk. Right?
And what we'll do is we'll put these links in the bottom of the notes so you can find these later.
And he says what happens on a TED Talk, people say, oh, there's some magic formula that everybody has to, which is untrue, right? But there is one thing that everybody has to do, and that is transfer the idea that they have into the brains of the people in the room. And the way you do that is through storytelling, So the majority of TED Talks, which is very difficult to kind of engage fully with a TED Talk, but they will tell you a story about themselves. And it could be a heartbreak story at some level, or it could be a funny story.
Yeah.
And we can get into the science of it as well, but when you invoke an emotion in somebody's brain, it releases dopamine in the brain. Dopamine is highly addictive. People are addicted to social media because they get dopamine hits every time they get likes or hearts for the stuff that they put on social media. that's a whole other program.
Yeah. But it's a fact. It's a fact.
It's a fact. But when people get hits of dopamine in their brain, they will remember it for longer. So they will remember the story for longer.
Yeah.
He also says the idea that's released by the individual, or the story that they're sharing, is literally shared at the same time in the brain of all of the people that are watching.
Yeah.
So for example, now, when I'm talking to people live on these channels we've got going, and they're listening and they're taking note, everybody that's watching is creating their own story in their brain about me, right? They are now, there's a whole part of their brain that is creating neurons relating to me. They're going, who is this guy? What's he talking about? Where's he come from? Oh yeah, we know him. Oh no, we don't know him. Oh, we must go and check him out. Oh, he's talking a load of rubbish. Whatever it might be, they're creating their own little story. And they will, every single day, even as I'm talking to you now, you're creating a story in your brain that is either going to be memorable or not memorable, depending whether or not I'm going to create some sort of emotion in your brain that you go, actually, yeah, I can, remember that. Also, what happens in people's brains, the same idea or the concept is happening. They're literally, the brains are being synced with the speaker. And when that happens, then you've got people on your side. Then you make it memorable. And when you create a hero's journey, rather than, we're talking here on Black Friday, right? And everybody, and I've done it as well, because there's a product of mine, a LinkedIn e-course, which has been discounted on Udemy, and it's Black Friday sale, and everybody's putting adverts out. Buy our stuff. I had like half a dozen emails today, and I deleted them all. Buy our stuff, but nobody is telling a story about it. It's just like, just buy, and it's not memorable. And you don't buy into the brand either.
I like the whole hero's journey as you talked about, because it's not just so much, you talk to someone about presenting and pitching and, talking about your business, and people are constantly saying, give passion, be emotional. But it's not just that. What you've done in that little story you've told me, you've created some extra connections. Michael Don Smith, someone I'm aware of. You've talked about that happiness and those feelings that I would have from your story. I was imagining what you looked like when you were 13 years old. What you've done there is you've told your story, you've made it more real for me. You've sprinkled some extra spices into it, let's just say, and the whole story has become better than you just saying, hey, I'm really excited, I'm really passionate about this, you should tell your story. That's what you've just done there to me, haven't you?
Yeah.
And you've told that story in a much better way than just shouting it from the top of your lungs.
Yes.
A lot of people, when they get told to go and present or talk to their clients, get told, be positive and be passionate. But the way you've told it has actually just created lots more memories and pictures in my mind. That's what you were trying to do, was it?
It's not a case of trying to do. It's just remembering that everybody loves stories. We've grown up, every single one of us have grown up with stories when we were knee-high. We've loved them. We've had to create those stories in our minds. So when our parents told us stories and we couldn't even read, we had to imagine everything in pictures. And it was our own ideas. We couldn't even articulate to our parents what we were seeing, but we wanted it again. And we want, tell the same story again. Why do kids want to hear the same story over and over and over? Why can kids watch cartoons or, these Disney films over and over and over? Why don't they get bored of it? Because they go into the story, and we've been programmed. In fact, Michael Don, and he'd be an interesting one to get on your show, he talks about the fact that actually, and I haven't researched this bit yet, we come into this planet already programmed for stories.
So if we move this forward then, as a business owner, as a personal brand, as an entrepreneur, I get up on stage, I put an advert out there, or I talk about my product. That isn't as effective as if I tell the backstory, tell a little bit more, put a bit of colour to it. Does this work for everybody, every situation?
Right, so one thing people totally miss, and that is the most interesting part about their business is themselves. The most interesting part of Apple was Steve Jobs. It was a person. The most interesting part of Microsoft was Bill Gates. Do we remember all of the other chief executives? You know, and I'm sure they were very good in their own right, but we don't remember them all. But we remember Steve Jobs, we remember Bill Gates, because their story about starting in garages and building their business is something everybody kind of goes, wow, that's pretty amazing. You know, that is
something everybody can do as well.
It's something everybody could do. Well, if they can do it, I can do it. So you get into that mindset, but not everybody can, of course. But I'm not suggesting anybody is not capable. Everyone can do it. And so the same with all of our own businesses. The most interesting and memorable part of your business is you. So why have I seen for years LinkedIn profiles where people talk in the third person saying, Michael is a really good storyteller. He creates beautiful whiteboard animations. He also has done LinkedIn training in the past. He'll be an excellent speaker for your show or on stage. I mean, it's not memorable in the slightest, number one. And number two, people will just switch off.
Yeah.
They go to sleep. You know, it's not. But if I tell my story about myself, where I've started, how I built my business and where I got to, that's something people can get into. The reason they can get into it because they literally are willing you on. You know, kind of going, go Michael, I want you to do well. You know, I've heard your story.
This comes back to the hero's journey.
Everyone has a hero's journey. Everyone has a story about their life, about their trials and tribulations as kids, trials and tribulations as teenagers, as adults. That's their personal side. Then they've got a whole story about their business or their employment and how they enjoyed it, and their bosses and their bad bosses and the good bosses they learned from. I've got bosses I can remember. I had terrible ones, I had really good ones. I can tell you loads of stories about them and how I experienced them.
If I've got a story about I've overcome some adversity in my life. If all I'm doing is telling that same story, you know, and if all I'm doing is running the same advert on TV, it's going to lose its effectiveness, isn't it? Well, I've got to move the story on.
Yeah, but you have, as an individual, so many different stories. So you need to have a story for when you're at a networking event and you're doing your 30-second, 60-second pitch.
Yeah.
You need to have a story when you're on stage talking or speaking, if people do that. You need to have a story on your LinkedIn profile or your Facebook profile or your Twitter profile. You need to have a story for when you're just having lunch with somebody. The biggest mistake brands make or businesses make, they will think, okay, let's tell a story about this glass, you know, how it holds the water beautiful. But what if we were able to talk actually more about where the water has come from?
Yeah.
Not about the glass itself.
Yeah.
But the water that's in here is actually, and I used to import water from France, so I can tell a little story about it. There's a water in France and it's beautiful, it tastes amazing. And there was a guy that used to work for me when I was in the textile industry, and he was French. And he knew I had a bit of an obsession with water. And this water is called Wattwiller. It almost sounds German, but it came from France. And it literally seeps through a mountain and through the rocks. And there used to be monks in some sort of monastery that used to collect this water and sell it, but now obviously it's commercialized. But he brought me this water, and it was, the pH of it was just gorgeous. The taste of it was, well, water is water, isn't it? No. It was beautiful. And I started importing it, thinking I was going to be a water seller. It didn't happen, but I had a couple of pallets delivered, and I think I drank most of it. But if you tell the story about the water that goes in the glass, rather than about the glass, then you're creating a story around the glass that will make people more interested in the glass. Give an example. In the last keynote that Apple did, and the only reason I sometimes look, well, the real reason I have looked at Apple keynotes in the past is because I was addicted to it. I've realised that now, and I've stopped it.
Yeah.
But the last keynote that they did, they had some film about different people wearing the Apple Watch. I haven't got one, by the way.
Yeah.
And I don't need one. And but they were showing these people wearing the Apple Watch, and some were like literally saving lives, and all sorts. I can't even remember what it was, but it was so effective in terms of storytelling. You know, different people. There could have been a runner, there could have been a skier, there could have been a water skier, there could have been a swimmer. Could have been somebody who was blind, somebody who had heart problems, all sorts of different stories they built into it, but they weren't telling you about the watch. They did on stage.
They skirted around the watch.
They skirted around the watch. It wasn't about the watch, it was about what the people were achieving as a result of and how it improved their lives.
Yeah.
You've got to create a script to begin with.
You've got a little bit of a story, haven't you?
You've got to create your story, yeah. And you've got to refine it, and you've got to say, okay, what's my story going to be, and how am I going to drip feed it? And what tends to happen is people want to give all of the story, all at once, and the solution. So let's say if we go on the hero's journey and say, you know, I've got a problem in my life and I want to solve it, and somebody shows me the hero's journey, what is, what could be, what is, what could be, what is, what could be, and then they go, here's the product for you, right? Then I've got all the answers. All I need to do now is compare it with other people. But sometimes it's quite good to leave people hanging. Do you remember, you guys are old enough to remember...
Well, I'm not, Khalid is.
Yeah.
He's definitely old enough.
I know. Do you remember the Nescafe adverts where there was this woman and this guy?
Two neighbours.
And there was a bit of... Everybody wanted them to get it together as a couple.
Yeah.
Yeah? Was it Nescafe or...
Nescafe Gold.
Yeah, Nescafe Gold. You even remember which brand it was. But those adverts were little stories. It's probably the most memorable story I can remember from my younger days. And it left you hanging at the end of it. So you wanted to know more. You were saying, okay, when's the next advert going to be? Yeah. Everybody now waits for the John Lewis advert every Christmas.
Yeah.
Because they know it's going to be an amazing story. And everybody else's are like lookalikes now.
But there's two right now, when you're telling me this, two stories I can remember right now. One is the Vodafone one, where they've got the guy from The Office, whose name I can't remember, Michael Martin, I can't remember. And he's met the girl at the train station, and the advert ends with her giving him his number. So you suddenly want to watch the next advert to see what happens. And there's another one, I think it might be John Lewis's, and it's a lady leaves her shoe, like Cinderella, on a train. And again, they've done that a little bit of adverts. It's not something I'd seen before, but they're going to try and create a sequence of adverts.
Yeah.
Just so we're waiting for the next step.
You've heard all of this, you know, somebody leaves a bear on a train, and then somebody goes and posts it on social media, and then, you know, they get so many hits, and eventually the bear gets reunited with the child. And those are little stories that people in their lives can create. And so here's almost a childlike medium where you see a hand drawing pictures on a screen. And the reason it works, because the story unfolds on screen and you want to see what's going to happen next. What's the next thing that's going to be drawn? As it's being drawn or it's coming to life on the screen, you go, oh, what's next? What's next? What's next? And people tend to watch to the end. Because again, now I create the story in terms of, you know, where's the current reality, what is what could be, what is what could be, what is what could be. So they get all these trials and tribulations and they really need a solution to this. And then at the end of it, you're going to go, well, what is the solution? Is this person going to be okay?
I guess, and again, you know, when I give a presentation, I put animations in, you know, I release each sentence as I'm talking about it, or each bullet point. That's one of the reasons why I do that, because I guess if I release everything and the whole slide's up there, people don't listen to me, they read the slide. You're talking about something similar, aren't you, whereby you release it in stages.
But it's pictures.
In pictures, sorry.
In pictures. So what's not so memorable is words, right? People struggle with words. So if you've come across NLP, you've got, you know, people receive things in different ways, so visually, auditory,
Yeah.
kinesthetic, which is the feeling, and then olfactory.
You did it again.
Nearly did it again. Which is smell.
Yeah.
You can't get a smell across in a video.
Yeah. Well.
This is not an explicit show. You can't get it across in a smell. But the other three is visual, auditory, kinesthetic.
Yeah.
So the visual thing is the drawings, the auditory thing is a voiceover, and the kinesthetic is create a story to leave them with a feeling.
Okay, I like that.
So that they
Can
can
you
then
say that
remember
last
it.
sentence again? It's create a story to.
Leave them with a feeling.
Yeah, and that feeling could be something warm. It could be. It's getting that attention, isn't
Happy, sad, annoyed, frustrated.
it?
It can be any kind of emotion that releases dopamine in the brain.
Yeah.
Do you know why they put animals in adverts these days?
Cool.
It's because you'll remember the animal and it's a hook in your brain to then go to the product in your brain. Because you might not remember the product, but you'll remember the animal. Because we all go, oh, look at that. So the most famous one for me that I remember is the VW cars, all the different cars, and they had a different dog in the car and in the passenger seat or hanging out of
Yeah.
the window. And they had literally, there was nothing being said, there was this music being played, all these dogs in these cars, and you remember the dogs, what they look like.
Look, we're going to wrap up now. I know there's a lot of comments, Khalid, but I've not read through them all. I don't know if there's any you want to highlight, if there's any questions. But you talked earlier about a couple of your clients, Virgin and things like that. Do you want to talk about any more clients you've had? Any big, small, exciting clients you've had?
This is a setup because we talked about this earlier. So some of the clients I've worked with, yeah, there are small clients and there's been bigger clients. And this is not about name dropping. And
It is. I like this one.
So I've worked for Microsoft in South Africa. Thank you, Microsoft. I did a whiteboard animation for them. I did a 6-month project for McKinsey in Germany, which was for their e-learning. But the biggest one, and my claim to fame, actually, I'll tell you a little story how this started. I got contacted by a charity in Spain, and this is a lovely story. Charity in Spain, and called Global Gift Foundation, and it's one of these charities that a lot of the celebrities in the world support, and they were building a house for vulnerable children that have, very terrible diseases, and they said, we want to do this video, what can you do for us? So I gave them a nice discount because it was a charity. I was also going into their gala brochure, and they do something called a Global Gift Gala. In London they were doing this. So I did this 1 year, and then about 6 months later, it was actually around this time, in December, and then about 6 months later or so they contacted me and said, one of our supporters who really promotes the charity and works with us would like you to do a video. And her name, I knew her name, but I never knew
What it meant.
I'd known the name, and when I mentioned it to my wife, she went, oh my God, yes, and her name is Eva Longario. And she obviously starred in Desperate Housewives. I've never seen the program, so I wasn't affected by stardom.
Have you seen it, Khalid?
No.
No, okay. He says very sheepishly.
And I spoke to Eva, and she wanted a video doing for her wedding, and it was a lovely project. I've learned in all my time of training people on LinkedIn is that people don't do anything unless you give them tasks to do. People go, yeah, it's really great, and yeah, it sounds great, but actually then going away and doing something is the hardest thing. So if anybody's watching, go and look at your profiles on social media and write a story a little bit about yourself. Just one last quick example. Shout out to Bob Rupra, who one thing we didn't talk about is my podcast, which is called Share Your Story. And
Share Your Story. We'll put links to all these things, right?
Share Your Story podcast. And I've interviewed 30 business people who run small businesses, and I've literally got them to share their story from birth, where they were born, where they live, all the way through present day, all their challenges through business. And my objective with that is to inspire other people that are employed, desperate to get out of their jobs, desperate to start their own business, are afraid and worried and don't know what's going to be coming up. Learn from other people, and I've interviewed some amazing people in America and the UK, and yeah, I've done 30 interviews.
Wow.
So download it, look for Share Your Story, look for the camper van.
You've also got Udemy courses, did you say, or LinkedIn courses?
Yeah, on udemy.com it's
Yeah.
a LinkedIn course with over 14 hours of content, and it's on a Black Friday sale at the moment.
Michael DeGroot or Staying Alive UK?
Well, just look up on udemy.com,
Yeah.
just look for LinkedIn lectures,
Okay.
and you'll find it. It's at Staying Alive, but it's as myself,
Cool.
Staying Alive UK, yeah.